In this video, we're going to talk about morphology. Morphology is the study of the structure of words. And you can think of morphemes then as the building blocks of language. So when we put morphemes together, we are able to create words, which then we put together to create sentences. So morphemes are the building blocks of language. They are the smallest unit of language that carries meaning. So whereas phonemes are the smallest unit of sound in a language, like doesn't have meaning by itself, right? So whatever the smallest unit is that has meaning, that is a morpheme. So that might be a root, it might be a prefix, it might be a suffix, it might be an entire word. Let's look at some examples. So play is a morpheme, right? By itself, that has meaning. If we were to take away one of the phonemes there, it would no longer have the same meaning. So if I took off ya at the end and now it was just pla, that has no meaning in English. So play is a morpheme, and because it can stand on its own, we call it a free morpheme. The letter S, when we add it to a word, is also a morpheme. It adds meaning to the word play. So play becomes plays, and now it's a different word that carries a different meaning. We would say, I play, he plays. So we've changed the tense of the verb. That S is a bound morpheme. It can't have meaning on its own, but when it's attached to another word, it carries meaning. So the word plays then has two morphemes, play and let's try another one. ING works in the same way. So playing has two morphemes, play, the free morpheme, and ing, the bound morpheme. That has now changed it from the verb play to playing, a different tense that we can use if we're using the continuous present, I am playing, right? Re, also a bound morpheme, replay. So when we attach that together, now we have two morphemes forming the word replay. We've changed the meaning of play because when we replay something, we're playing it again, right? All right, so morphology is fun because it's all about how we put units of meaning together to make words. So you can imagine there's a lot you can do to play with language that involves thinking about morphemes. Morphemes can also change a word's lexical category, which was mentioned in the reading. So the word teach, when you add the morpheme it becomes teacher. So we've gone from a verb to a noun. Morphological awareness, then, coming from the idea of morphology and morphemes, is the knowledge of how to change verb tenses, make compound words, change lexical categories, so change a verb to a noun, like we just showed with teach and teacher, build words using prefixes and suffixes. So all of that falls into the category of morphological awareness. And developing morphological awareness can be really helpful for growing your vocabulary. I love this example. So nominalization is the process of turning a verb into a noun. And it's something that we see a lot in school-based texts, especially in science and social studies. Nominalization often makes words much more complex than they were when we started. So the word vary, the verb vary, when we turn it into a noun, or when we nominalize it, it becomes variation. Develop becomes development. Contract becomes contraction. Discover, discovery, and you can see the rest of the list. So some of the language that we consider to be kind of more school-based or more academic in the way that it sounds and is used has gone through this process, right? And so helping students to understand the roots can help them to understand the nominalized form or the noun that's been formed. So if you understand the verb vary, you can understand what's meant by variation. So you can see where attending to morphemes and the way that words can shift can help students develop their vocabulary. So in that same vein, let's talk about second language acquisition and related to morphology. So one of the greatest challenges that you face when you're learning a new language, and I'm sure those of you who have learned a new language, either English as a new language or a world language, have experienced this challenge. It's just the sheer amount of vocabulary that you need to learn to be able to meaningfully communicate in that language and in the context of our MLLs to engage in school-based learning. As the chapter mentioned, the average second grade student knows about 6,000 words in English by the time they get to second grade. The average high school junior who's grown up speaking English knows about 80,000 words. So if you're coming into an English medium of instruction classroom as a newcomer and the students around you know 6,000 words or 80,000 words in English, obviously that's a challenge to be able to catch up. Now, of course, we know that the students who are coming into these classrooms are not coming in as empty vessels. They're coming in with all of the knowledge of their home language or languages. So a lot of the work that teachers can do to help students grow their vocabulary in English is helping them to make connections between their home language and English, because that will help speed their vocabulary development in the new language. Another challenge is significant differences between languages and how they express tense, past tense, present tense, future tense, how they express plurality, and a whole number of other differences in how things are expressed across language. So addressing the challenges then and some opportunities that we have. One is it's important to explicitly teach word parts and meanings. Obviously, embedded in meaningful content learning is ideal. That means teaching root words, creating root word walls, and teaching prefix and suffix meanings, because as students learn how these building blocks of language fit together, they can start to build more and more complex words or start to decode more and more complex words. Root word walls are great, especially in science and social studies. There's so many roots that are then connected to different terms they would be learning. So rather than have a teacher just create kind of a general wall, I always encourage teachers to think about the content that they're teaching and to teach lessons or teach the roots and the words that would correspond to that content, and have students then think about other words that use those same roots. Teaching cognates, I mentioned that above, but it's so important to help students make those connections. 30% of words in English and Spanish are cognates. What it means to be a cognate is it means that they have the same meaning and they have the same or almost the same spelling. So for example, biology, biología, same meaning. Telephone, teléfono. So if you can help students start to identify all of the similarities between languages, it will speed their vocabulary development, because they're coming in with so much knowledge. If the average second grade student knows 6,000 words in English, that means the average second grade student who grew up speaking Spanish knows 6,000 words in Spanish. So how can we help students make those connections so they can build their vocabulary in English? Another thing you can do, and this requires a little bit of knowledge of the student's home language, which I encourage teachers to always seek out when they have multilingual learners, is to be able to teach some of the morpheme patterns that are similar or different across languages. So for example, in English, the ending tion is represented in Spanish with C or S, shun. So helping students to see that connection can help speed their vocabulary development, and things that are different. So in Spanish, plurality and gender are marked with articles. Articles are words like the in English, or a. In Spanish, the articles are el, la, las, and los, and un and uno and una and unas. In English, we use the and a and an. It's pretty straightforward, but in Spanish, the article has to match the gender or the plurality of the noun. So la casa, the house, becomes las casas, where in English, the doesn't change. It just becomes the houses. So having students see something that's actually easier in English, when English can feel like it has a lot of rules and is really complicated to learn, pointing out some of the things that are simpler sometimes in English when compared to another language can also be really helpful for students. And here's just a couple of images of what a root word wall could look like, kind of mapping out the Latin and Greek roots of different words and helping students to understand that meaning, so then they can identify other words that use that same root. All right, so that is it for morphology, and I'll see you in the next video.